Hello, welcome to Michael's Musings on Music. Today I want to talk about my 5 favorite conductors and why I think they're so special, and talk a little bit about each one. Now, this is in no particular order. Yannick Nezkurov, the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Met and the Orchestre Métropolitain in Montreal. The thing that I love about Yannick is his incredible energy, his positive energy, and his complete absorption into the music. But he comes at this from such a genuine place. I mean, his energy and his positive attitude is really infectious. As I've talked to some musicians from the Philadelphia Orchestra, and I asked them, why do you love Yannick Nezkurov so much? And that's sometimes what they tell me, that he's so collegial that it's a joy to make music with him. And that's very important as a conductor. He's really one of the new generation of conductors, very approachable, very collegial. If you want to see just a wonderful clip of him conducting, go to YouTube and search the Rotterdam Philharmonic with Yannick Nezkurov doing the last 5 minutes of Mahler 9. And it's trained right on him. And his facial expressions and his gentleness of his hands are just incredible. I mean, this is what makes all these conductors remarkable, is the way they can bring about this special moments, many special moments throughout performance. Next, we have Carlos Kleiber. His technique was the most expressive that I've ever seen. He was incredibly spontaneous. What he did on the podium is nothing that you can try to imitate or slavishly practice. It just came from in here. He was an odd person. He had a lot of mystery surrounding him. He'd always demand an exorbitant number of rehearsals if he was going to do a concert. He only did a few concerts. His repertoire was not particularly broad, but just a genius when it comes to music and conducting. For example, if you check on YouTube, you can see his Der Freischütz overture to the opera Der Freischütz, his rehearsal. And it's just, again, imaginative, just beyond the notes. It's something so magical that he does. And his recordings are iconic. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony with Vienna, his Schubert symphonies. I remember I had to conduct the Schubert's Third Symphony, and I listened to his recording. And it was unlike any other recording. His tempos were quite different. But he did them in such a way that you were absolutely convinced that that's the right way and the only way to do a piece of music. And that takes great musicianship, and that's certainly what Carlos Kleiber had. My next choice is Chelyabinsk. Now, really, for him, he's my go-to when it comes to the music of Bruckner. Chelyabinsk conducted, of course, all sorts of music, but what I love of him, what I love his work is with his Bruckner. And he's really an example of the old school conductors, ones that were very deep. If you hear him interviewed, I mean, he thinks very deeply about music, philosophy, how music and silence relate, what the composers were up to, what does the music mean. Very deep person, very deep musician. And in those days with conductors, Yannick Nezkurov may talk with the musicians at some point in rehearsal. He's always open to suggestions. Chelyabinsk and that generation, they just knew how the music went, and that's how it went. And there was no debate about it. There was no discussion about it. But his Bruckner and the patience that he exhibits when he conducts Bruckner, for example, he just lets the music unfold. And, it was a simpler time, even 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And now it's just such a different time. And Chelyabinsk had the wisdom and the patience to let the music just come out unhurried. And especially with the music of Bruckner, this is very important. He used to rehearse without a score. He could write out the symphonies of Bruckner, every single part of every single instrument he could write out if he had to. And that's such an inspiration for me too, because what we're always trying to do as conductors is to learn the scores the best we can in the most thorough way we can, and that takes time and patience and work. And here was a conductor who absolutely internalized every single note of Bruckner. Now, he didn't record it particularly a lot because he was of this idea that recordings froze the music in time, and he felt very strongly that that the music has to live, it has to be alive. And so he would change his tempos according to the acoustics of the hall, for example. So he was very much making music at the moment. Next we have Claudio Abbato, one of my earliest inspirations. Some of my favorite recordings are by Claudio Abbato, some Mahler recordings I absolutely love. I loved his touch with Mendelssohn and Schubert, so light and so electric. I had the good fortune to see him perform one time. His technique is very elegant. There's a certain refinement to it. And we used to say with the Mahler recordings that Abbato released with the Chicago Symphony, the Chicago Symphony in those days were very brass heavy, very strong, very strident. And Abbato as a conductor was very refined. And so this combination of the two is what made these recordings just phenomenal. And then I must mention Simon Rattle. Again, an incredible communicator. If you look at any of his concerts and with the digital concert hall from the Berlin Philharmonic, which you must look into if you don't know about that, you can see all of their concerts on your computer. His intensity is white hot, and there's no self-consciousness in it at all. He's just making music. You can see it in his eyes, you can see it in his gestures. You know, it's not necessarily the most refined technique, but it gets the point across so strongly. And his range is extreme, from the music of Bach all the way to contemporary music. And his Mozart is fantastic too. I remember I saw a concert, the opening of the Berlin Philharmonic season, and he was conducting the last 3 Mozart symphonies, and they were absolutely electric. Now, I limited myself to 5. Of course, there are so many other great conductors. As I finished this list, I thought, well, what about Dudamel? He's fantastic. What about Bernstein, for goodness sakes? But, you know, these are the ones that came to mind. These are the ones that really influenced me in many different ways. All of them have this incredible imagination and incredible musicality. Next week, I want to talk about my 5 favorite composers.